Well, welcome to WAY2B TV. We're glad you're there, and we have Joni with us tonight, and I'll introduce her in a minute. The contact information on the screen up above me up here is the call numbers. If you want to call in, we can handle one call and one waiting. Also, the Twitter hashtag WAY2B TV, and you can tweet, and the tweets that come in, we can feed them onto the screen, and you'll see your tweets show up if you would like to tweet. The chat room is open, and of course you can use the chat room. And then the yellow contact is interact@way2b.org, and that contact is for in-between shows. You can use it any time, but I won't be able to tend to interact@way2b.org. That's the email, and I do answer emails. And so feel free to email us with your questions and comments also, and I'll answer them during the week, and that all those things work all week long. So I appreciate you being here today, and Joni is with us. Say hello, Joni.
Hello.
And so we're gonna host the show. We're gonna host the show together today. The weekly channel activity. I wanted to touch base on some things. We had a really good week. At the end of the week, there was over 1,000 views. The 1-minute video about WAY2B in a minute was watched over 500 times, and so that's a good thing. But this week we also had some channel activity, had some good conversation online. Jailbird wrote to me, and he said, to use Jesus, you have to cherry pick the verses you see fit to use as a moral way to live. Why not drop Jesus altogether and just talk about being moral? Why this philosophy tap dance around a character that was overall a monster? And that's Jailbird's depiction of Jesus. I get you are trying to bring people together, and that is a noble effort, but there are better examples of morality alive today than in the entire Bible. And we went back and forth about that, and we're going to address that some today. But it's kind of interesting, and I think most atheists assume that I do not follow Jesus, and yet I am very intent upon following Jesus. And also, most Christians do not think that I don't believe in the supernatural, but I don't believe in anything supernatural. And at the same time, I feel that Jesus is absolutely the great teacher of the way to be. But so were many other teachers throughout history. What we're going to watch today, I think, if you watch that 1-minute video, what you discovered in watching the 1-minute video was that at the end of it there was a link, and that link would take you to a longer 9-minute video that talked about who WAY2B is and what we are, what we're doing, if you will. And that video I'd like to show you now. It's 9 minutes long, and it would help you understand, and that's going to be our discussion starter for tonight. I'd like for you to ask questions, make comments, challenge me in any way that you want about what I'm talking about. And so let me play that video right now. Thank you all for letting me come tonight. Thank you. Well, I never tire hearing that. But you know, one of the things I must get used to is speaking into a camera. For decades, I've spoken to live audiences all over the United States and taught hundreds of small groups. I like seeing faces, hearing laughter, and applause. But then I remember you're there too. And even though I cannot see your face, I can hear your laughter and even your thoughts in the YouTube chat room and on Twitter. And better yet, you have the potential of being my largest audience ever. WAY2B is located in Lakeland, Florida. On Sunday afternoons, I teach a group of people who have listened to me for many years now. Each person in our group has a mind of their own. I am convinced an ancient speaker named Jesus, along with many others throughout history, knew and taught a way to be content in life. And that's all they taught. The supernatural was added after these teachers died. More specifically, Jesus taught people how to be happy without religion. One ancient writer, included in the Bible, has Jesus using a unique figure of speech, kingdom of heaven. And while the writer uses this figure of speech 32 times, no other biblical writer uses the phrase at all. And that same writer has him telling many stories of this kingdom. Each story begins by asking a question. What is the kingdom of heaven like? Or to what may the kingdom of heaven be compared? To the surprise of most Christians today, the writer's depiction of Jesus never has him placing this kingdom beyond the bonds of our natural lives. He simply tells stories of ordinary people involved in ordinary things. These stories relate how one's attitudes towards circumstances affects one's contentment. My group and I get along not because we share supernatural beliefs, we don't, but because we share a common interest in this way to be happy in life. I'm not trying to convert them from anything or to anything, and they're not trying to convert each other either. This seems to be the key to our free-thinking group. It's not the supernatural that changes one's life, and that's where we hope you'll enter the conversation. We know that many of you may be deeply religious, and others of you are not religious at all. But if I had to guess, regardless of beliefs or disbeliefs, most of you want to be content. Either way, however you may argue, question, or comment, you are welcome on the WAY2B TV channel. For months now, we've been broadcasting privately to our snowbirds in other states, while meeting with our in-studio discussion group. Our new weekly broadcast will be right here, in our living room, on the WAY2B YouTube channel every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. What is WAY2B? In short, WAY2B is a way of being that leads to contentment. As we get to know each other, we hope you will help us build this channel. Your interaction with us will drive what we do. Your host for the show will be Joni and I. We live in the southern United States and have homes in Tennessee and Florida. In the U.S., the vast majority of the population, according to major polling, identify in some manner with the Christian religion. You may be religious or part of the growing minority who have given up on religion altogether. As with our in-studio group, we are not here to convert you from anything to anything. You have a right to believe or disbelieve, or remain impartial about whatever you like. The issue we hope to address is contentment, how to be happy in life, without railing against anything or anyone. You may sometimes think we're right. A thumbs up on one of our videos is good. We need your encouragement. You may sometimes think we're wrong. A thumbs down may just mean the right viewers are listening. We need your point of view. Either way, we're grateful for the input. How cool would it be to get equal numbers of likes and dislikes? Wouldn't that mean a real conversation is going on? Joni and I married nearly a half century ago in 1970. We have 3 grown children and 7 grandchildren. We both graduated from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Neither of us is any longer religious, even though over the past 20 years we serve 5 churches in Indiana, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Florida. By the time I retired in 2012, we had lost the ministry bliss that sent us to the seminary in the first place. One of the best ways I found to shift the paradigms of those who identify with Christianity and those who rail against it is to reveal what scholars see. That is, the ancient speaker known as Jesus had something very different to say than either group seems to embrace today. He was not the first or the last to teach a way of being, and this way of being is equally valid, despite one's belief or disbelief in supernatural things. As I began to set up the studio over the past year, I involved myself in much YouTube training, through the YouTube Help channel and through the YouTube Creator Academy. I want to do my work such that you want to share whatever we do together. I want us to be in dialogue, have a conversation, and interact. YouTube tells me I must be consistent within the channel and within the videos. One of my great challenges is to have a targeted audience of people who normally disagree with each other and vehemently. I need to avoid overreaching with content creation so that my energy is sustained over the long haul. I need to do the work necessary such that WAY2B TV may be found easily on the web and within YouTube. Every video needs to continue the conversation, and yet at the same time inform and welcome a new person to the channel. Eventually, I may need others on YouTube with which to collaborate and have on as guests. One of those guests might well be you. Finally, I feel I already have the attribute YouTube creators recommend most highly. I am passionate about what I am doing. As videos are produced, 3 major playlists will begin to fill out. The major playlists are, For Heaven's Sake, Did Jesus Speak of an Afterlife, Kingdom of Heaven? Woe to You, Religion, What did Jesus say about the practice of religion? And the WAY2B, Recovering from Too Much Religion. So what was Jesus' contiguous line of thought? Did it have anything to do with the supernatural? There are 2 other playlists on the WAY2B TV channel. Featured videos are simply special videos we create in support of the WAY2B theme. For instance, one day I went to the feed store. I bought a straw hat and a plaid shirt, a pair of coveralls, and a bale of hay. I sat down in front of a green screen. Then I placed that farmer in a farmer's market. What would a southern farmer tell his friends after giving up on religion altogether? Finally, the Make You Think playlist contains videos made by other YouTube creators. These videos represent many points of view. They are great teaching aids. So remember, Joni and I, weekly, every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Share this video and seek solutions that seek the way. It's time for me to walk the dog. All right, we're back. Well, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to make, just send them in. But don't forget, if you tweet, to use hashtag WAY2B TV in the tweet, or we won't see it on the feed. So you need to use hashtag WAY2B TV. If you don't use the hashtag WAY2B TV, it will not show up on the tweet. On the tweet. So, at any rate, basically the discussion starter for tonight was that video, and that video, I think, explains kind of who we are and what we're doing. Right now, my concern is the argument between atheist and theist, and both claim that one must claim to be one or the other. That if you believe in God, then you are a theist, and if you express disbelief in God, then you are an atheist. And that's just simply not the case. For the Christian population, after pastoring 5 churches, I can tell you most people can't tell you for sure exactly where they are between those 2 things, especially when it comes to miracles and angels and the devil and heaven and hell and on and on. There are so many subjects to talk about, and there are so many varied opinions about them across the nation related to Christians in this country. And I've pastored from the northeastern United States and New England all the way down here to Florida. And so I've met a lot of different people, and I've pastored in some of the most conservative churches around in a conservative denomination, Southern Baptist, and I have also pastored in what's arguably one of the most liberal denominations, United Church of Christ. Not the Church of Christ, but the United Church of Christ. And so I do know that the argument is much broader than atheist and theist debaters and fundamentalists want to make the debate. One of the things that we might look at, there's something here on Twitter came in, I think. Oh, this is just someone that's one in our group saying hello. But at any rate, one of the things I thought we might do is I might give you kind of a little bit of an overview about what we're doing and what we're teaching. One of the things that would help with that, I think, because we also had a video come in this week on a video comment come in this week on a video we made that's only about 3 minutes long. And I think that particular video is a great place to start related to just exactly what it is going on. The comment came in and says, I think you are being vague in both stories. In the first story, Jesus was a terrible liar and a tyrant. In the second story, the man was also a liar and a tyrant. If you can't see that until you get into the details. If you think the character of Jesus was a good man, you are a very confused person. You have to fabricate a different reality to assume the supernatural aspects were just added to a real guy's story. It's more likely the entire story is a fabrication. Jesus was an intolerant and disgusting character. Now, and I know many that are closer to the atheist end of things feel that way about Jesus and about the Bible and so forth. I was born and raised in it, and though I don't consider myself a fundamentalist theist by any means, I don't consider myself a hard atheist by any means, or an atheist at all, but rather what I think is that we don't know the historical facts of Jesus, and we're not going to discover the historical facts of Jesus at this point in time. And so there's a short video, it's about 3 minutes long, and so I tell two stories about Jesus. The first story is the traditional Christian story, and the second story is the story of what more likely happens, because after he died, supernatural legends were built. The stories were written by gospel writers who had never met Jesus. They were educated Greek-speaking persons, and Jesus and his buddies were all peasants and uneducated. And so that highly well-written Greek gospels that we have were not written by those people. They were written in the middle of the first century and long since after Jesus had died, toward the end of the first century, even part of them. So let's look at this video for just a moment and see what I'm talking about. And maybe this will stir your interest related to conversation. Have you got time to hear two stories in 3 minutes? If you are an atheist, you probably won't like the first one. If you're a theist, you probably won't like the second one. The Christian story goes like this. The one and only God made everything and everyone. The first pair of humans were named Adam and Eve. They disobeyed God and triggered a bad thing called sin. So many years later, God made a deal with a man named Abraham to found a great nation. This nation would yield a Messiah via a supernatural birth to a virgin mother. Christians call that Messiah Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus performed many miracles, like walking on water. He voluntarily sacrificed himself to being tortured to death. This created a pardon for that bad thing called sin. Then Jesus came back to life. He visited folks for 40 days before going up to a place called heaven. He promised his believers they could join him there. One day he will return to grant his promised pardons to his believers, and they will go to heaven too. But non-believers will not be pardoned. They will be punished for that bad thing called sin and granted eternal torment. And that's called the gospel, the good news, the Christian story. But then there was another story. There was a big bang. Then billions of years later, there was a simple man. He went around teaching others the way to be in life. His following developed and grew. He warned them about practicing religion in front of one another. His warnings were becoming effective. People began to feel free from religion. Religion became very angry. Finally, religion said enough is enough. He was arrested and killed. After his death, some religious leaders could see the brand equity and what he had been doing. So they hijacked his reputation and his following and continued with their lucrative guilt-based religion, only this time with him as the poster child. After hundreds of years, religion published a book with 750,000 words. Only 5% were attributed to this simple man. These few words were grossly embellished into a supernatural legend. For the one who obeyed the tenets of religion, these religious leaders promised a wealthy afterlife.
The obedient would live in a mansion on a golden street alongside their demised relatives. But if one could not believe the book, walk the walk, and talk the talk, they would die, only to be tormented forever. This is the simple story of a simple man punished for exposing the fallacies of religion while teaching the way of humility, gentleness, mercy, peace, and love. His simple line of thought became a needle in a haystack. It remains so until this day. Today, Christians dream of a wonderful life after death, yet the ancient speaker spoke of a wonderful life while one actually lives. There was nothing supernatural about him. His teachings were just naturally super. The books behind me are all Christian references. I purchased most of them while earning a Master's of Divinity at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I served as a pastor in Indiana, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Florida. After seeing religion up close and personal, I have something I need to tell you.
All right. Jan wrote, you mentioned Jesus' contiguous line of thought. Why is it so important, and what does it mean to understand Jesus' contiguous line of thought? The stories we just watched, by the way, are just two stories. Both stories are fictional. Both stories are made up. Both stories were invented long after Jesus died. I invented one of them, the second one, and the gospel writers invented the first one, along with Christianity for hundreds and hundreds of years, as the story got embellished and changed and so forth. Most people don't realize that we have over 5,000 handwritten manuscripts, copies of copies of copies of copies that from throughout the years, and that there are over 250,000 variances in these manuscripts. We cannot discover the actual facts of Jesus, and we do not have quotes from Jesus that we can say Jesus said these words. The red letters in what we used to call the Red Letter Bible only represent about 5% of the entire Bible, which is 750,000 words. And so we have so little that we're using to base these very hard beliefs on, and which we use to judge other people with, by the way, and use to make broad-reaching and very dogmatic statements about these things are not foundational. They are not things that we can speak to in that way. The contiguous line of thought of Jesus, though, Jan, that is, what is it Jesus was talking about? What was he talking about? And as we read the words that were depicted from the first gospel until the last, those words are trying to depict Jesus as a certain kind of a person who talked about a certain kind of thing. And that kind of thing was a way of being. It was not about doing. It wasn't about ritual. It wasn't about doing certain acts or going to church or giving money or any of that sort of stuff. But rather, Jesus was a person who taught a way of being. And in teaching that way of being, he expressed an attitude, and all of his stories that he told were about people doing ordinary things and having ordinary events, and their attitude toward these circumstances that existed, and how those attitudes affected their ability to be content in those circumstances. And that's what all of those stories are. For a long time now, Christians have believed in this kingdom of heaven beyond the clouds or wherever it is. And Jesus' kingdom of heaven was used by a gospel writer. The words kingdom of heaven were used, that phrase was used 32 times. And that phrase never referred to anything beyond this world. He told 11 stories about the kingdom of heaven. To what shall I compare the kingdom of heaven? To what is the kingdom of heaven like? And all of those things were things that Jesus asked those questions and then told those stories. And in each one, it was people acting out everyday events with everyday circumstances, and their attitude toward those circumstances resulted in their ability to be content in the situation they found themselves. And so that's where we are with the contiguous line of thought. Jesus was about being, not about doing. Or as I like to say, it's not about walking the walk or talking the talk. It's about managing your thoughts. Who are you inside? Are you a genuine person? And are you becoming a more genuine person and a person who is making a quality person out of yourself? And that's what most of the major teachers throughout the ages have tried to teach. Whether you were talking about Dharma and Karma and Hindus and the Buddhists, whether you're talking about the Jewish religion, Christianity, the Sikhs, when you go on and on about it, what you find is every single one of them is saying, here is a way of being that makes you more content. And that's what religion should have been about all along. It should never been about all these dogmatic things, about supernatural things that we've argued over to the point that millions of people have been killed over holy ground and over holy books and over holy things and holy beliefs. That was not what I think Jesus intended in the first place. But nonetheless, that's the contiguous line of thought is where we should be. And if we had been there all these years, think about it. There are 5.5 billion people who claim to be associated with either Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, or the Jewish religion. And of all those 5.5 billion, out of 7 billion people in the world, which is the vast majority of the world that is involved in some sort of religion, all of those religions have within them the teachings about being. All of them do. And yes, they have other stuff. And they've evolved into other things. And they're a long way after thousands of years of being where they were when they started. And so I think that's some important, very important information. One of the things that we're trying to do with our work, these are the videos that will come up eventually on the WAY2B channel. For heaven's sake, we'll simply talk about those 11 stories that Jesus told and how they simply talk about nothing but ordinary things and ordinary people and ordinary circumstances and people's attitudes toward them and how that affects their contentment. And so we'll go through those 11 stories and we'll talk about the figure of speech, the kingdom of heaven. The Jewish people thought of themselves as having a kingdom on earth. The kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God, as they put it, was going to be this place where the Messiah was going to come and the Messiah was going to reign. They were going to be the rulers and they were going to rule with him, and they were no longer going to be captives or slaves or abuse people. And their abusers, their antagonists, were going to become the slaves. And when their antagonists passed away, they were going to go to a place called Sheol. And they were going to sleep on a bed of maggots covered by a blanket of worms. And so it's a very different thing that they had in mind. The concept of a beyond the clouds or after death kingdom was simply not a part of Jesus' teaching in his day. And then Woe to You Religion is the playlist that is going to fill out Jesus' specific teaching on religion itself, and how religious leaders would devour a widow's house in order to get what they wanted, all along making long, lofty prayers. How they would load people down with burdens and not lift a finger to take them off. How they would be looking all shiny and wonderful like whitewashed tombs on the outside, but inside they were dead men's bones. The inside of their cup was dirty and the outside was shiny and clean and looking good. And so Jesus talked about religion specifically. And what did it mean for the scribes and the Pharisees, the religious leaders of his day, to carry out religion, and what effect did it have over the people? And Jesus did not mince words concerning that. And then the WAY2B itself is what I call the WAY2B itself is the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus begins with these overarching principles and moves on to the benefits of adopting the way, being the salt of the earth and the light of the world, being a refuge for people who are trying to find a place of refuge, a city on a hill. He talks about tempering this resistance. Don't think that he came to abolish the law, he says. He came to fulfill it. But unless your righteousness is better than religion, you will never know the kingdom of heaven at all. And that kingdom of heaven is within you. It's something that you have. And you'll never be completely at peace if you live out your life like the scribes and the Pharisees lived out theirs. And then he does these illustrations. He goes through illustrations of how you could see the way within it, and how the shift from doing to being was taking place. And it wasn't about what you do and what you say, but it was about who you are inside. You've heard it said, don't murder, but I say, don't get angry. In other words, don't do murder, but don't let your attitude be angry. He said, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, but I say, don't lust. Don't do adultery, but rather inside be a person who doesn't lust, doesn't have that attitude, if you will, and so forth. All 6 illustrations, all the way down, and even to prayer and sacrifice and to giving. Each of those illustrations illustrate the shift from doing to being, and the humility and the gentleness and the peace required to carry out this way to be in life. He talks about the hindrances that keep us from being in that way. He talks about the anxiety we feel rather than we're afraid we'll lose if we be that way, if we live out the life that he said. And instead, we go another way. We try to force matters. We go through life knocking down doors to get what we want. And he talks about this being versus doing throughout it. He talks about the way things are provided to us. We provide for each other. People who have this way about them will take care of each other, and they'll want to take care of each other. He talks about the fact that this way is rarely accepted, and that others try to imitate it. And he says, don't be fooled. And then he talks about the house on the sand and the house built upon the rock. It talks about the resilience that you'll have. When the hard times come, you'll be able to stand. But if you build your way upon just outward doing and wanting stuff, striving to get things and to be things, or to have things and so forth, and to be known as a leader or the CEO or whatever it happens to be, that life is full of potholes, because it's much more difficult to be at peace and to be content while you strive. And so he talks about that, the resilience that you get from being in this way. And so we'll go through all of that, and none of it is supernatural. None of it. And what you'll notice in the Bible is that the supernatural stories and the way to be are separated. Jesus' teachings are very separate from the supernatural stories. The supernatural stories were added by the writers in order to sell the Christian religion. When Paul started out, he simply said, I know nothing but Christ and him crucified. He didn't talk about Jesus. He didn't talk about Jesus' character. He didn't tell Jesus' stories. He didn't talk about Jesus' life, but very, very little. But instead, all he said, all I know is Christ and him crucified. And he was selling the idea of a resurrected Jesus and a supernatural set of events. And so walking on water and turning water into wine and raising other people from the dead and healing the sick and so forth. And we want to convince ourselves of those things instead of learning how to be content in life with the circumstances that are around us, no matter what they are. That we can be content in those circumstances. So I think overall that the way to be is simply a matter of that contiguous line of thought. And you learn to have that line of thought yourself. And then you can face almost anything. No matter how people treat you in life, no matter how they act around you, you can learn not to react horribly to them simply because you panic. Someone should not be able to change my attitude or your attitude to something else. They shouldn't make me less of a person or cause me to change myself in their presence because of something they said or did to me. I should be the kind of person who can remain at peace and live my life without worrying about what everybody else is doing. I don't have a lot of criticism for other people, and I don't need to have a lot of criticism for other people. They're going to go on about their lives and live it the way they do, and I'm going to go about my life and live it the way I do. And so I think that's very, very important. Let's see what we've got on the Twitter here. We got some things coming in. Many people wrote about them. Which teachings in the Bible were most likely to be... they cut the Twitter off. To be truly something. Let me see if it'll come up on this screen. Okay, many people wrote about them. Which teachings in the Bible were most likely to be truly the words of Jesus? Which teachings were most likely to be truly the words of Jesus? And in reality, I don't think any of the teachings in the Bible were the literal words of Jesus. That is, if you're talking about a quotation. But if you're not talking about a quotation, I think those things where Jesus was teaching his followers and his minions, the 12 that ran around with him, this way to be. He said, to you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. But for the rest of them, they don't know. And so I talk in parables. And these parables were all about this way of being. They were all about, the parables represent, most likely people remembered Jesus' parables, his stories that he told. It's like anybody that we know from 50, 60 years ago that had some kind of a show or an act or they were a television celebrity or whatever. If they had something that they said quite a bit, a sign off or whatever it might be, we would remember those things. And I think his sayings were probably remembered well. That is, at least various forms of them. You don't find them in exactly the same way as you go through the Gospels. You also don't find that his parables are told the same. Sometimes they're in a different order. Sometimes they give different elements. Sometimes they're mutually exclusive. That is, one thing was, if Jesus said the story one way, it would have been impossible for him to say it the other way, because you can't put them together. In reality, you really cannot harmonize the Bible. People try to do it, but you cannot do it. As you move through the Gospels, you also find that each one of the Gospel writers had an agenda. And as they wrote those Gospels, they would copy from one another and from a source called Q, which the Q is just the first letter of a German word that actually means source. There's some unknown source out there that they don't know about. They don't know what it is. They don't know when it was written. They don't know if it was one part or several parts or whatever. But they just know that from looking at Matthew and Luke, for instance, that they both copied from somebody. Each of them copied from that same person, and that they both copied from Mark, who wrote the first gospel. But as you go through the gospel, what you'll notice is Jesus' teachings, Jesus' doing, and most of all, Jesus' character changes as you go through the Gospels. You start out in the middle of the first century with Mark, and then not on about 3/4 of the way through, you get Matthew and Luke, but then almost to the end of the first century, you get John, the last Gospel, and you get the book of Revelations. By the time you get to John, Jesus is arrogant. Jesus is someone who claims to be God and so forth. And at the beginning, Mark has Jesus somebody who does miracles to help people. And John, Jesus has Jesus doing miracles to show off. In Mark, when he does a miracle, Jesus says, "Don't tell anybody," according to the book of Mark, or whoever wrote the book of Mark. But then by the time you get to John, the scribes and Pharisees are saying, "Show us a sign so that we know you're from God," and he will show them a sign. And his miracles are much more public. And Mark, the scribes and Pharisees would beg him to show a sign, and he would refuse to show a sign at all. And so Mark has him, the very first gospel, written as a peaceful, content, gentle, humble man who did not want to show off, as a man who was not doing anything but just trying to help people. And by the time you get to John, you get into this much larger picture of the supernatural and of the relationship with God and the Son of God and all of those kinds of things. And what you wind up with then is what the Christian the development of the argument over Christology. You start with early writings of Paul, and there's 7 undisputed letters. But by the time you get over there to the end of the first century, you've got 13 letters, and the rest of them are all in dispute over who wrote them in the first place. People claiming they're Paul who are obviously not Paul, and so forth. And so that's one of the things that we'll cover on the channel. Though we have, this is the traditional view right here of the timeline of the Gospels. And then if you take out all of the names right there, those are the names that have been removed. I removed them. I call them Gospel 1, Gospel 2, Gospel 3, and Gospel 4. And the reason for that is because we don't know who wrote those. The church put those names on there. The original timeline looks like that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Mark written first, then Matthew, then Luke, and then John later on. But that's what the original timeline looks at. But by the time, if you look at it the way scholars look at it, what you discover is that we don't have any books where we really know, undisputed, or believe undisputed, where scholars believe undisputed, that they know who wrote them, and that's the 7 undisputed letters of Paul. That's it. The rest of the letters, the rest of the universal epistles like James and 1st and 2nd and 3rd John and so forth, and the Gospels themselves, and then what's called the Acts of the Apostles, which is actually the Acts of Paul. He was mentioned 150 times, where Peter was not mentioned but 50, for instance. So what you wind up with is with a bunch of books with a lot of mystery, and an escalating change in how they're trying to present Jesus as you go through the various Gospels and the various books. And so that's kind of an important aspect of what we're going to learn. But we'll also go through this on the channel. They'll develop a playlist at some point related to the development of the Bible itself and exactly what we're dealing with there. Or Colleen wrote, I guess I shouldn't say people's last names even though they're identified on the web. Thank you for finding me and giving me an invitation to listen again. I have my faith, but have lost confidence in organized religions. Well, Colleen, you're not by yourself. That's just the way it is. An awful lot of people. I've pastored 4 churches, and was on staff at a 5th. And what I found was, and I've worked in religion all my life. I was born into a Southern Baptist family and began teaching the Bible when I was a teenager. And I graduated from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I was an A student there. But what you'll find is that the majority of Christians, people who identify with the Christian faith in this country, have a lot of doubts. And they understand, because science has come so far, that they realize we've got to take a different attitude. We've got to look at it in a different way in order that we remain credible, or even be credible at all, which we have just almost lost entirely. The atheists make good points. The atheists make many good points. And scientists have discovered many things that cause what they've discovered in science, which has become almost factual, almost knowledge, if you will. And you compare it with much of the things that Christianity claims today, and they're mutually exclusive alternatives that cannot stand side by side. And so we need to learn, if we want the way to be, we want what Jesus taught to survive this migration of knowledge that has been going on so rapidly now for the past at least half century or more. But and will go on and is increasing. It's accelerating. We're learning more every day about the universe and about this world, about things developed, about evolution, about all sorts of things. We need to understand that we're not going to be able to get reasonable people, reasonable educated young people especially, to understand anything about Jesus, if you want them to understand anything about Jesus. Instead, we're going to cling to things that are just not even possible. And no, I don't believe in supernatural things, but everybody believes what they need to believe and what they want to believe. I am a person who does believe that people have developed a certain kind of comfort within religion, that it serves a certain purpose, that it serves a certain need. But I think most of those things can be arrived at. The peace that you want to feel, the contentment you want to have, the way you want to be thought of by other people, and the way that you want to think of other people. All of that can be developed outside of the supernatural. And I think Jesus intended for it to be, from what I have seen of his contiguous line of thought, to get back what Jan said. So, Colleen, I don't think you're by yourself. I think you're in the majority, not in the minority. Jan wrote, can't atheists and theists both experience contentment? Yes, absolutely. An atheist person is not a miserable person who is just full of despair, and when they die, oh my gosh, and all of that. But I know atheist people. One of the best, most caring and loving and careful people that I know told me one day in the kitchen when we were at a gathering. She said, "Now you do understand I'm an atheist, don't you?" And I said to her, "Yeah, I think that may be why you're so nice." And she just laughed. But the fact is, there's an awful lot of people and atheists are all over the map also. I had an atheist tell me one day that her mother died, and that her mother talked to her still, but that she was an atheist and she did not believe in supernatural things. So I don't know how she reconciles that in her mind. That's okay with me, though. People can believe what they want to believe. I just want to share what I've learned about the way to be, about the development of the Bible, about all of these Christian characters that we talk about all the time, and about what it can mean to your life, how you can wind up being at peace and content with other people, even if those other people are your antagonist. We don't want to go back to a situation where, as the Jewish nation of Jesus' day was thinking, all of our antagonists are going to wind up miserable and we're going to wind up rich. And then Jesus told them all them stories about it's harder for a rich person to know the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Or don't be thinking about riches. Or the rich young ruler who came to him and went away disappointed. Jesus didn't talk about not putting your mind on riches, then at the same time told you when you were going to die, you were going to be rich. That's not at all the case. And so we need to look at it. We need to look at it and understand that there is something wonderful to gain from it, but you can gain it without going to all these supernatural extents. Jan also writes, if you can't reconcile the Gospels, what is one to believe? One is to believe what they want to believe. Each person has a right to belief. I believe in the right to belief itself. My personal beliefs are that when someone talks about God, everybody wants to poke at me about, do you believe in God? And so I'll just address that for a moment. And the hour is almost gone. When I talk about God, I think of God as, for me, I think of theos. Jesus said, I abide in you and you abide in me. And I abide in the Father and the Father abides in me, and so forth. But he talks about this, all of his things that he talks about was this way to be inside, about this abiding inside. And so when I talk about God, I don't see a supernatural God. I see a natural God. I think within all of us as human beings, there is that place within ourselves that we reach to when we are needing badly to get beyond where we are and have an unwillingness to go there, both in grief and in trying to accomplish things that are important. And both in trying to, it's very difficult to change your attitude. This way to be is easy to teach, and I can teach it all day long about being poor in spirit and about being mourning your own condition and not someone else's, about hungering and thirsting for what is right but not being full of it, about being gentle, about being merciful and responding in kind less often so that you'll be responded to in kind less often, about being a peacemaker, drawing people together instead of driving them apart. But this is what you need to concentrate on. What you need to believe is that if I, as a person, am willing to change myself to a genuine person who can live my own life and have my own beliefs and center myself in my own way of being, and that become a quality product, not only will I be more content myself, but I'll be a non-anxious presence for other people, and they'll feel more comfortable around me. I think that's the key to it. And so what are we to believe? We're to believe that which makes us content. We're not to believe that which causes us to be a slave to a religion or to practices or to rituals or to anything that causes us to think that somehow or another there is some force beyond ourselves that we're going to somehow cajole and manipulate and somehow or another cause that person to change the circumstances of my life and to change the circumstances of other people's lives, but rather those circumstances change at the same rate and with the same coincidence, if you will, or the same likelihood that it changes. Just as many people have cancer and die who don't believe in the supernatural, and just as many people have cancer and die who do believe in the supernatural. The fact is that what Jesus was trying to teach us was not how to cajole some supernatural force into changing our lives, but rather how we could change our lives in such a way that we could find a way in which to be content no matter the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And that's the key to it. That's the key to belief, in my opinion. Those are hard questions, Jan. We have about 10 minutes left. Does someone else have a question? Let's see. We can let the Twitter feed go? Back to rotating. If you have a question or comment, please do tweet. Use the chat room. Those are good comments that we're having on the chat room. We don't have a huge audience tonight, but we do have some folks. This is our first night, and I'm really glad that we have some folks on tonight, and folks that are asking us questions and so forth. I'm hoping that this will grow and be something. I enjoy doing it. I've been doing it for about 15 or 20 years now, and I teach the way to be. My book is The Way to Be, Recovering from Too Much Religion. One of the things that I would point out to you is that you can't buy the book right now. The book is out of print. And so this is not me hawking a book. But the book is out of print. This summer I hope to finish the second edition of it as I developed all these videos. And the second edition of it, and it will be available again on Amazon. And so it's called The Way to Be, Recovering from Too Much Religion. And I think it's important stuff. The other thing that I would tell you too is we have a weekly newsletter that we send out, and that weekly newsletter will allow you, it will be sent on the day of the live events, and the weekly newsletter will have within them a little bit about what the live event is going to be about, plus it will have a link, a live link that you can click on that will take you straight to the broadcast. And so all you have to do is use your cell phone. You text The Way, all caps, one word, THEWAY, The Way, to 22828. And if you text The Way to 22828, it signs you up for the newsletter. It simply will contact you back. You put in your email address, and it will sign you up. And so then you will start getting the newsletter. So I would encourage you to do that. Let's see. I think I had a couple of other closing comments I wanted to make. Yes. Please remember, I'm somebody who, if you give me a thumbs up, that makes me real happy, and I'm glad you liked what we did, and I'm glad you got something out of it, and it's encouraging, and that's all good. But if you give it thumbs down because you don't agree with what I said or the way I said it or whatever, and I'm nervous, I can tell you that this is a brand new medium for me. I've spoken all over the United States, but to get on the broadcast and to speak into a camera, and I can't see you like I can a live audience, that like the one I have on Sunday afternoons here in the studio. That makes a big difference. But I would encourage you to do a thumbs down, because all that means is the right person is listening. But either way, we are glad about the input, and I need to know what's working for you. If you're having a hard time with sound quality, if you're having a hard time with video quality, if my lips are out of sync, which I hope they're not. Sometimes it's pretty hard for me to tell on the monitor up here, especially in a live event. Let me know that. It's fine to tweet that. It's fine to put it in the chat room. It's fine to put a comment on a video and tell me about it. You can message me through Google. You can write interact at way2b.org if that helps you. But feel free to say whatever you need to say. I want you to be my best critics. I want you to be somebody who's helping me build this channel. And I'm hoping that some of what you say will drive what I do. I hope that I'm able to develop videos that specifically pertain to what you're wanting me to talk about. And so I'm glad that we had this tonight. I'm surprised the hour went by so fast. I'm talking too fast, I can tell you that. Usually I slow down and I'm more measured and I think better. But nonetheless, I'll get used to this idea of staring at this camera where I can't actually see your smiling faces. And I know some of you are probably smiling right now, maybe laughing out loud. I don't know. So I thank you very much for being here today. But do go ahead and text. There it is. And text The Way to 22828. The Way 22828, and that will sign you up for the newsletter. Now, the other thing that I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to subscribe to the channel. Those of you who use YouTube know what that means. All you have to do is go to Way2B TV. If you go to Google, if you go to YouTube and type Way2B TV, Way2B space TV, you will see my channel in the search results. Click on it, and it will take you over there. And there's a subscribe button on the channel page. And if you subscribe to my channel, then YouTube will also send you, every time I upload a video or do anything, even in the middle of the week, they will show you everything I'm doing and when it's happening, and they will alert you. They will alert you when there's comments made on my videos, and they will let you know, just generally the activity that's going on. I did have one of the things that people suffer this week. All people that are doing these YouTube broadcasts, and I have done so much training related to YouTube and watched and learned so much about this. But one of the things that one of the major shows that I watch talks about is the trolls. And so some of you all like to get on YouTube channels and just aggravate people, and you like to get on there and cause a disruption. Please understand you're not a disruption to me, but also understand there's a drop-down menu beside your name, and if we get tired of you enough, we can just say goodbye. And so be at peace with us, and we'll be at peace with you. We want your comments. Disagreeing with me is not an issue. You can say anything you want to. I don't have a list of words or foul language that you can't use. Some of you have different personalities, and that's fine. You do what you need to do. But if you get on there and start trying to make a bully pulpit out of it, or you get on there and start trying to sell something that you have, or bring something into a live event that you have, and use this channel to advertise your channel in the middle of one of our live events, most likely, because Google, whether you know it or not, Google actually detects that and marks it as spam and puts it on my list and tells me this is probably spam. Do you want to block it? Okay? So it's actually against the Google's rules to behave like that. And against, of course, Google owns YouTube, the reason I keep saying Google. But it's against YouTube's rules to behave like that. And so we have that. But this week I had a troll come on, and that troll said a lot of things, and then would change their handle, their ID, and use another fake account, and they come on again and post the exact same stuff. And it was stuff that had nothing to do with anything we're doing. It was stuff about the end of the world and the end times and all of this kind of stuff. And it doesn't really pertain to us so much. And it was long, and it was verbose, and some of it was rather abusive. And so I marked them as someone whose post could not be seen. But I've only had one of those so far, and that's good. Somebody wrote on here, thanks for the invite. We're gonna be with you every week from now on. One person writes. Let me click on this one. Let it come up. Let me see here. The technology that goes with this little operation is beside of me, and so I'm having to operate the equipment. Let me go over here to my Twitter feed. All right. Thanks for the invite. We are going to be with you every week from now on, Bill and Carlos. So that's pretty cool. I know them from somewhere, I think. I'm pretty sure, but I'm not going to say their last names. I've got to learn not to say last names on Google. And I apologize to Jan and Colleen for saying last names. So thanks for being with us. It's time that we sign off, and so here are the credits, and I appreciate your being with us, and just use the comment fields, use the chat room, use Twitter, use interact@way2b.org, and let me know what your needs and desires are and what your thoughts are, and I'll work on this every week. I promise you that, and we'll try to make it better and better, and I'll try to get more comfortable. So we'll see you next week.